Hey there, my name is Lori Schmitz, and I'm an evaluation specialist with the Mid-America Prevention Technology Transfer Center. We're with the Partnerships in Prevention Science Institute at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa. Today we're going to create a simple dashboard in Microsoft Excel. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. This presentation is prepared by Mid-America PTTC at Iowa State University, supported with supplemental funding from SAMHSA, and the grant award number is listed on this slide. Before we jump into Excel, I'd like to share a little bit about the PTTC network. The network aims to strengthen and expand substance misuse prevention efforts by delivering training and resources to professionals in the field. It emphasizes quality enhancement, professional assistance, and next-gen engagement as its three pillars. It also focuses on capacity building and fostering a sustainable prevention workforce. The network structure comprises of 10 regional centers across the U.S., including a national coordinating office. So each regional center tailors its efforts to meet the unique needs of local prevention professionals. Mid-America is Region 7 at Iowa State and supports Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas, and Iowa. Next, I'd like to do a quick overview of the process of creating the dashboard before we actually switch over to Excel. Step one would be to design the layout. So this can also be called wireframing. And on a separate tab, use some border formatting to lay out your ideas. So step two is to create a table from the clean data. This will allow the pivot tables and the slicers to be dynamic when you add more rows of data. But definitely make sure your data is clean and ready to go first. Then step three is to create pivots and slicers from the table. So again, on a separate tab, create the tables and slicers based on what you'd like to present, and also based on that design layout you did before. And then step four is to actually create the dashboard. And on yet another tab, begin creating the dashboard by inserting shapes, adding formulas that pull from pivots, and then copying over those slicers. So let's get started in Excel. This is sample assessment data for participants in various prevention programs. In column A, we have participant ID, which is a unique ID for each participant. We have a date column, pre and post assessment data for knowledge gain, skill development, confidence increase, and behavior change. And within this, there's a change column that is looking at the difference between the pre and the post assessment. We also have a gender column, age, ethnicity, program type, and substance risk. We're going to jump ahead briefly. I wanted to share with you a final version of the dashboard so you have a general idea of what we're looking to do in the end. On the upper left, we have a logo. On the top are slicers. In the middle, we have several different shapes or call-out boxes. In the middle, another call-out box. And on the left and the right, there are two tables, and these are connected to pivot tables, which I'll share with you on how to do later. And then at the bottom, we have a couple different charts, one pie chart and one bar chart. And notice when you click on the slicers, all of the visuals change based on your selection. So we will go over how to add those as well. Backing up again, the first step of the process is to create a layout design, and this is also called wireframing. In order to do this, simply open up a new tab and type in what you want to see on your dashboard in the end. And then you can also use these lines. So up here, you can click here and use borders to lay out your dashboard. So similar to the final dashboard I shared a minute ago, we have program type filters at the top. We have call out boxes for knowledge, skill development, confidence increase, and behavior change. We have a table of count of participant ID by program type, a table for count of ID by substance risk, a call-out box for total program participants, and then a gender chart and an ethnicity chart at the bottom. The next step in the process is to create a table from your raw data. So we'll switch back to the raw data tab, click anywhere in your data, do Insert, Table. And once you've done that, your data table will look a lot like this. Creating the table will make your source dynamic, meaning it automatically expands or contracts as new data is added or removed. Now that we have layout design and a data table, we can look at adding pivots and slicers in a new tab, and we will go into that in more detail. To insert a pivot table, simply click anywhere in the data, go to Insert, Pivot Table, and a box pops up and you can choose whether to put it in a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. For training today, we're going to add a new worksheet. I'll name this worksheet training_pivots. Before we add data to our pivot table, let's flip back to the layout design and just check out what we're looking for again. For this first pivot table, we're going to get the information that will go in these 4 boxes in the middle: knowledge increase, skill development, confidence increase, and behavior change. So back to our training pivots tab, click in the pivot table to activate it. I'm going to increase the size here. And over on the right, the pivot table fields are available. We're going to choose knowledge gain change, skill development change, confidence increase change, and behavior change. And notice how these are summed. We want to change that to average to get an average and a percentage. So go ahead and click that caret in the values down in the lower right. Go to value field settings and change this to average and click OK. And I'm going to do this for each one at the bottom right. Okay, now all of these are in an average format. The last thing I want to do to this pivot table is to change this from decimal to percentage. So I'm going to highlight this and click in number area, click percentage. So now we have the pivot table that will fill in this part of our layout. Or if we flip to the final dashboard, that will be these final call-out boxes or shapes. So next we're going to add the 4 more pivot tables that will complete the pivots for this particular dashboard. If we go back to layout design, we will need a pivot table for count of participant ID by program type, count of participant ID by substance risk, as well as a gender pivot table and an ethnicity pivot table in order to get these 2 charts. So to get the next pivot table, let's go back to the data table tab, click anywhere in the data and do insert pivot table. But this time we're going to add it to our already existing worksheet. So click existing worksheet and your cursor is in the location box, but instead of typing something in here, go to the training pivots tab where we'd like it to go. Notice it put the location in here. Click anywhere under this pivot table. It added the location of cell A7 and click OK. And I know for this pivot table, I'd like count of participant ID, so I'm going to pull the participant ID from the pivot table fields down to values. And I'm looking for program type. So I'm going to drag program type to the rows. And now we have our second pivot table. And I know my next 3 pivot tables will be very similar. So in this case, I'm going to copy the pivot table and paste 3 more. So they're all the same now. In order to change the pivot table, click in the next pivot table, and we're going to remove program type. And instead of program type, I'd like to see substance risk for that table that's falling on the right of our dashboard. So now we have program type table done and substance risk table done. So click in the 4th table down, and instead of program type, you can either uncheck it or you can drag this back up. That'll remove them. So I'll uncheck this, and we're going to add this one as gender. And click in the final pivot table, either remove program type by dragging or uncheck program type. And this one will be ethnicity. So you can see we have all of our pivot tables that we will eventually put on a final dashboard. Before we add slicers though, I'd like to clean up the tables a bit. It's very important to add names to your pivot tables, and you'll see why in a minute. To name your pivot tables, click on the table and go to Pivot Table Analyze. And up in the upper left, you can change your pivot table name. This one I'm going to name Metrics Pivot. Click in the next one. This one will be Program Type. Click in the next one, and this will be substance risk. The next one will be gender. And the final will be ethnicity. So now each of our pivot tables are named. Next, on this same Training Pivots tab, I'm going to add a slicer. And this slicer is what we will see on this layout design at the top for program type filters. Or on the final dashboard, the slicer is this top row right here. So click in your pivot table, go Insert, Slicer. And I know I'd like this slicer to be program type. So I'll look for the program type field, check it, and click OK. And our slicer popped up. I'm just going to move this around a bit. So notice when I click on it, just this table changes. For the purpose of the dashboard, we'd like this slicer to be connected to all of these tables. And this is where the naming of the pivot tables comes in handy. So right-click on the slicer, click Report Connections. And notice how we have the name of the pivot table and what sheet. I have a lot of extra pivot tables here, but that's for another tab for that other final dashboard. So ignore the top ones, but we want to connect the slicer to all of these pivot tables. So go ahead and check each pivot table that we created, and they're connected to this sheet, and click OK. Now notice when I click Pure Base Program, how it changed all of the different pivot tables. And I can click other program types as well, and it changes them all. Now we have all 5 pivot tables we need for this dashboard, as well as a slicer that goes at the top of the dashboard. These pivot tables and the slicer become sort of the engine of the dashboard. So next we will add a new tab and look at bringing over some of this data onto the final dashboard. I have a new tab called Training_Dashboard. Before we start adding to it, let's revisit the layout design. Remember, we want a logo in the upper left, add the slicers at the top, add some callout boxes, and some various tables and charts. Let's first enter the logo. Click Insert, Pictures, and I'm going to place it over cells from this device and choose PTTC logo and click Insert. Now we have our logo. Next, we will look at adding those 4 callout boxes toward the top of the final dashboard. Click anywhere in your dashboard, click Insert, Shapes, and I'm going to choose the rectangle with soft edges. And go ahead and click and drag. And I know I'm going to have 4 of these, and as long as I'm happy with the size, you can do a Control-C and Control-V for paste. So they're definitely not in line. I want to share a quick way to line up your boxes. Click on the box, hold down the Control key to copy all of them. Click Shape Format, Align, and Align Middle. I also know that I am not going to want these boxes to move when the size of the cell changes. Notice how it moves. In order to set these so they don't move, right-click on the shape, go to Size and Properties, and over on the right, choose under Shape Options, Don't Move or Size with Cells. Now notice when I move it, it does not change size. Now this one does not either because I had all 4 of them clicked. I definitely have some more sizing to do with distance between boxes, but we're going to wait to the end to clean up a little bit more. The next thing I want to do is add a text box within the shape. To insert a text box, go Insert, Text Box, and click in your shape and create the text box. I'm going to copy and paste these into the other boxes. Next, I'll add my text to each box. In order to make the background the same color as the shape, click on the text box and make your shape fill green. At the same time, we can change the color of the text to white. So to do that, go to Text Fill and choose white. So that's looking pretty good, but I still see a box around here. So the next thing I'll do is to make the shape outline no outline. Now we have knowledge increase in the box, and we can move that around as well. And I'm going to do the same thing to each one. Okay, I have my headings in each of the boxes. I'm going to move these around just a little bit. So the next thing I'd like to do is to add my percentage changes into each one of these boxes. So going back to the Training Pivots tab, this is where we're going to pull in these four numbers from this particular pivot table. And I'm going to take note which cells these are in, so A4 through D4. So I'm going to go back to the Training Dashboard tab, click on the shape that you want to add the number to. Up in the function box, write equals your tab that the pivot tables are in, and it's called training_pivots, exclamation mark to say that it's looking into that tab, and then click A4. Notice how it came right here. So we can't see it because it's behind a text box, but I'm going to put it in the center, and then I'm going to increase the size. Let's check and see what 24-ish does. We're going to bold it. And it's a little too close to my knowledge increase, so I think what I'm going to do is put the bottom line on, and that pops it down in a good spot. So we're going to do a similar thing for each of these boxes, but we're going to pull in the cells that correspond with each one. There's another way to format this in a slightly quicker way. When you click on the box you want formatted, so I clicked on this, up in the upper left there's a format painter here. Click Format Painter and then click the next box you want. See how it just automatically puts it the same as the first box. So, but we'll need to click Format Painter each time, and then click on the box, Format Painter, and click on the box. Now, I would like that percentage to be white. So one thing we could have done before is to add it white to begin with, but let's go back and do that. So click on your percentage and go up to your text font color and click white, and do this for each one of these. Let's revisit the layout design. We currently have the logo in the upper left and these four callout boxes. The next thing we're going to work on is adding the tables by program type and the table for substance risk. This table we're going to pull in is the count of participant ID by program type. So I'm going to start by putting the headings in. The first one is program type, and in this column it'll be count of participant ID. Now notice how when I double click and expand this, oops, it changes the size of my text boxes and the shapes. So in order to fix that, I'm going to go back, and in each of these text boxes, I'm going to right click on the text box, do Format Shape, and on the right here, choose the properties and say Don't Move or Size with Cells. And I'm going to do that for each one. Don't move or size with cells. Okay, now look how I expand this and my text box does not change in each one of these. I can expand it and it just stays there. All right, so this is my heading for the first table. I'm going to do bold and underline. So Control B and Control U to underline. So now in order to bring my pivot table in, I need to enter a formula. We're going to look back at our Training Pivots tab and figure out what we need to bring over. This second table we created is for program type, and it counts the participant IDs for each program type. So we know we want to bring that one over. So take note of which cell that the first line falls in. It is in A8. So back to the training dashboard, similar to what we did in the shapes, we're going to do equals in the function box, equals training underscore pivots, exclamation mark is pointing at that other tab, A8. And see how that brought over community workshop. I know it's 4 lines, so I'm going to drag this down, and then it brings in the grand total on the 5th line. Then I'm also going to drag this over, and it brings in my counts of participants. I decided I don't love the line how it is there, so I'm going to highlight and uncheck the underline. There'll be another way that we add lines at the end. I'm going to make that wider, and I'm also going to bold the grand total at the bottom. Okay, let's revisit the layout design again. The next thing we're going to look at adding is this table count of participant ID by substance risk. So going back to the training dashboard, I have a similar heading, so I'm going to copy this over. Control C and Control V are shortcuts to copy and paste. I'm going to change this to substance risk. Okay, so that is the heading of that table. So similar to this table, we're going to create a function to pull over the pivot table data. So going to the Training Pivots tab, I know the substance risk table is this one right here, and it's A16. So I want to look to pull in cell A16. So either in the function box or within the cell, do equals your tab, which was training underscore pivots, exclamation mark to point at that tab, A16. And that brought over the first line there. And I'm going to drag it down. This copies my formula down. And then if you drag it to the right, that's copying formulas to the right. So it's pulling in my count of participant ID, which was the column just to the right of the substance risk in the table. Similar to this table, I'll highlight and bold it. And I can always do this too and expand. So the next thing we'll work on is adding those slicers at the top. So going back to the layout design, we're working on this part up here, the program type filters, or sometimes they're called slicers. In order to add the slicers, go to your Training Pivots tab, and this is the slicer that we want to add at the top. It's called Program Type. So click on the slicer, Control C or copy it, and we're going to come to the dashboard, and at the top, Control V to paste. So now we want to get the slicer to be 4 across the top. In order to do that, click on the slicer, and up here, go to the Slicer tab, change the columns to 4 or however many you have, and expand it. So we need to remove this program type heading and take off the lines around the outside. To do that, go to Slicer Settings and uncheck Display Header. That'll take the header away. Notice how we still have this line around here, and that has to do with this slicer style. going to switch over to the final dashboard and just let you look at what that final one looked like again. This one did not have a line around it, so we're going to go through the process to get rid of that line now. In order to remove the lines from around the slicer, be clicked on the slicer, that activates it. Go up to the slicer tab, and in the slicer styles, right-click on the one you're already on and click duplicate. And we'll rename this no border program type. Keep whole slicer and click the format button and say none and click OK. And then click OK again. Notice how it's still there, nothing has changed yet. You actually have to go up to the slicer styles and click your new one. And this is the no border underscore program type. So click that and your lines went away around the slicer. And we are eventually going to remove these lines within all of the cells. All right, let's expand the slicer so we can see all of the words. Before moving on, let's check the slicers and make sure that they are adjusting the data as we click them. So click the first one. Okay, it's affecting all the slicers. In order to click and choose all at once, hit the Control key and then click each one. Revisit the layout design again and check what we'll work on next. We currently have all of this top part done. We'll do the total program participants toward the end, but next we're going to work on the gender chart and the ethnicity chart. Going to the Training Pivots tab, let's go down to our gender pivot table. Click on the pivot table and do Insert. You can either do recommended charts, or if you already know the chart you want to use, you can click directly on it here, but we'll click recommended charts. I'm going to choose a pie chart and click OK. Adjust this a bit. Add your name. And if you'd like to design it a bit more, up here in the Design tab, you can look through the different design types that you'd like to use. Let's go with this one, Style 12. So at the same time, let's do the chart for ethnicity. So again, click in the pivot table, do Insert, and at this time I know I want to do a bar chart. So you can go right to the bar chart and click. And similar to the pie chart, we need to name it and adjust the size. Similar to the pie chart, we can choose the design under the Design tab. Let's go with Style 7. So in order to get the charts onto your dashboard, do Control X to cut out. And in your Training Dashboard tab, do Control V to paste. On ethnicity, do Control X to cut. And on your dashboard, do Control V to add it to your dashboard. Now let's check to make sure that the slicers are working with our tables. Notice that the slicers are changing all of the different visuals. We're going to add one more call-out box for the total participants. So go to Insert, Shapes, and the rectangle with the soft edges again. add the callout box. I'm going to go into Properties and go ahead and say don't move or size when cells change. So similar to these boxes up here, I'm going to enter a text box within the shape and add the heading. Call this total participants. Format it a bit. Okay, so it looks a lot like the other boxes up here. And now we need to create a formula in this box to pull in total participants. So going to the Training Pivots tab, we could just pull a grand total from this cell, so we could look at B12 as being the formula we enter in there. But we'll find that when you click the slicer, it doesn't work with the slicers. So if this becomes blank, for example, when the slicer comes on, this callout box will be 0. We'd like to create a formula that is outside of this pivot table. In order to do that, we'll do it outside of the pivot table. I'll call it total participants, just anywhere on your sheet here. And then you do equals and click on the total. And this will add a get pivot data formula and hit enter. And this is the cell we're going to draw the formula from. So back to the training dashboard, click in the cell, do equals your sheet, which is underscore training pivots, exclamation mark, you're pointing to this pivot table, or I'm sorry, you're pointing to this tab. And then we are looking for so in the shape box, do equals your sheet, your training pivots sheet, exclamation mark to point toward training pivots sheet, and then F1 is where my formula was in. Hit enter. It popped up over here. Let's do a little formatting, moving around. We'll make this bigger. Bigger yet. Bold. Do 48 and we'll make this white. That's a little too big. I'm going to go down a little bit. 40 is good. Now notice how when I click the filter, the total participants changes as well. Now had we pointed right toward that pivot table with the formula, it would be a 0. So that's why it's important to do that equals get pivot data function outside of your pivot table for some of these total numbers you'd like to pull in. Okay, now we have the nuts and bolts of our dashboard all ready to go. Let's spend a little time cleaning up the spreadsheet and making it just look prettier in general. First, let's remove grid lines. So go View, uncheck grid lines. And that cleans it up quite a bit already. I'm thinking our charts need to be a bit bigger and maybe move down a bit because we'll add a few lines as well. All right, let's insert some lines. To get long lines to break up the dashboard a bit more, click in the cell and go Insert, Shapes, and choose a line. Do the same thing here. Insert, Shapes, and add a line. Okay. I'm going to pull these together a little bit so we're generally lined up on the edges visually. I think I'll do that. So it's just about in the middle of that. Now these, I sense there's a little more space here than here. So I'm going to drag these over a bit. Sometimes it's tricky to get in the box just quite right. Drag this one over as well. All right, and just to make sure I have these all straight, I'm going to highlight or click on them again and do Shape Format, Align, Align Middle. Might put that a little bit more in the middle as well. All right, and real quick, we'll check the filters one more time, make sure everything is adjusting as it should be. Okay, that looks good. Hold down your control to reset your filters. And that is your final dashboard. Again, the steps are: start with clean data, create a table from your data, create pivot tables and slicers, and then from those, pull data into a final dashboard. So in closing, here are a few best practices and reminders for creating dashboards and reports. So bold or color important labels or numbers, but sparingly. Remove unnecessary grid lines and use white space like we did at the end there. Use charts to show trends or comparisons, but avoid the overly colorful as they are distracting. Use conditional formatting to draw attention to high and low values. Highlight key details with summary boxes, make it interactive with those slicers and pivot tables, and tell a story. We didn't get to that on this dashboard, but there are ways you can tell stories through questions, findings, and then recommendations. Thank you for your time today. If you have a need for technical assistance or any other questions, feel free to contact me. Have a great day.